All right, I'm on record.
Yeah, I'll let you record.
Give me-
Hang on, let me give you access here.
Okay.
Participants. Not to record. Good. Yeah, I lost another show the other day for not having a second backup. Okay.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day that was doing several recordings with Alan Steinfeld, and he failed to record any of them.
Oh.
Like 10 hours, 10 hours of stuff. And it's just like, and they just said, no, we're not going to do it again. We're going to do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Today on my podcast, I have a very special guest. I've been friends with my friend Walter Rooker for a number of years. There's a couple of subjects that I find very key to the UFO field. I started in UFOs. I started the UFO sighting stuff, the government conspiracy stuff. And over the years, I realized there was a bunch of subjects that came up that were very, very important that I thought were sort of the answer to maybe what's going on in ufology. If you understood these things, you could understand the bottom underlying how reality works, what's actually going on here. Because the UFO phenomena just simply shows that there's something weird. There's an anomaly which shows us that we've got something wrong. Now, some of the stories that I've been following, and Walter worked on one of them with me, and that's the connection between DNA and consciousness. We won't get into it today. There may be a connection between DNA and consciousness. So I was working on that. The other thing people know that I've pushed is the idea of the blindfolds. There's a bunch of trainers around the world training blind people, young children, this thing of seeing through the blindfold. And people can say they're peeking or whatever you want to say. But if they are looking through the blindfold, and if these kids can hear a mile away like they say they can hear, this is something that we should be studying. And people really aren't studying it. They aren't studying the DNA thing. The other one I have is radios. I just did a 3.5 hour session that I'm going to put on the podcast with what they call sometimes people call it the C6 initiative. And that is the use of radios. This is a ham radio guy, an expert on radios, who developed a technique of using radios to make communication. He's like 100% successful. It's absolutely a stunning story of how this guy developed this whole technique using these high-powered antennas and then moving down to small antennas where he can actually get communication with some sort of intelligence, whether this is the ET intelligence, whatever. And so I've followed that story. But again, it's a story that may take years for people to catch on. The story we're going to talk about today with Walter is one that when I first saw it, I said, this is important. This is key to understanding what's going on. And that is the thing of physical mediumship. Now, a lot of people just say, just sort of slough it off. It's, it's woo-woo, it's stuff. But if you realize what's actually going on and that this is probably legitimate stuff and what people are doing, you suddenly realize that this is going to answer a lot of questions about how things work, because we have a lot of things that we're making assumptions on. So welcome, Walter, and thank you for being my advisor on this. I think you first contacted me. You can tell the story. You first contacted me. I got into the physical mediumship and I was talking about it, and you were trying to make contact with me and say you should actually talk to somebody who's been in a physical medium seance, and you have a collection. So what you've done, for people who don't know Walter, you've got a collection of all sorts of stuff. You've got this huge collection on physical mediumship. You're probably one of the foremost authorities in the world in terms of collecting all this material, the same as I collect material. You have a whole collection on Bashar, which we will have a podcast session on Bashar. You've got a massive collection, maybe the biggest collection on Bashar. Direct voice phenomena, you've got a huge collection on that. And I remember just a couple of weeks ago, my assistant Sinead came to you and said, hey, Walter, what do you got on Area 51? And you went through your little collection and sent a bunch of videos and interviews and stuff like that, stuff I'd never seen before. So Walter is definitely my advisor on physical mediumship. And we'll get into, he's going to talk about what this is, and we're going to find out why this is important. And then we're going to talk about what Walter's doing. You're going to run a session, a special session to try to move this subject forward. So let's start. And maybe start by sort of giving a little background on how you got into this, and particularly to tell people why is it important that they should pay attention to what's going on inside physical mediumship.
Well, we talked a little bit about this before the start of the podcast here, Grant, and it's really kind of funny. I had no idea what physical mediumship was. I was familiar with mental mediumship, John Edward, um, the hundreds of mental mediums that are now all over the airwaves, both TV and radio. Cindy Kaza is one that I've seen in person. And I understood the connection between spirit speaking through individuals to members of family, where you would have people in an audience, the mental medium on the stage, what they call the platform, and the mental medium would point at somebody in the audience and say, I have a message for you. It's daddy, it's so-and-so. Do you have somebody that looks like this? And they'd carry on that conversation between the spirit person and the physical person. So that was pretty straightforward, real easy to determine whether or not it was accurate or not. All you had to do was listen to the information, listen to the people who that information was going to. And much of that information was not known to anyone except the individual spirit and the individual physical person, hence really validated. So that was pretty simple stuff. And then one day I was just doing a Google search on something that had nothing to do with mediumship whatsoever. And I ran across this idea of physical mediumship. And the first thing I started looking for was, present day physical mediums. And I found there are very, very few of those. I was living in Atlanta, the Atlanta vortex, as Bashar calls it these days. I was in Atlanta at the time, and my wife and I were getting cold, during the fall. You know how it is in Atlanta, the fall, it's in the 80s. And so we were getting cold, we want to move south. And so I said, okay, let's move south. So we moved south and ended up on the southwest corner of Florida, living several places over here, directly across from Kevin Lee's Metaphysical Church and his really large and growing physical mediumship sessions that he was having over there. And I mean, I couldn't be, but I was only 125 miles. I found him on the internet or something. Long story short was, if it just kind of fell in on me. I found it by a Google search that didn't have anything to do with it. The next thing I know, I'm in the middle of an area where it's available to me. I've attended at least a couple dozen, maybe up to 3 dozen physical mediumship seances over there. And I liked one of the words that you used. You said it's probably real. And that's a very good way of saying it, because it probably is real, but it's very, very difficult to determine exactly what real means in physical mediumship. So let's talk a little bit for a second, if I could, about what is physical mediumship. In mental mediumship, you have communication from the spirit person to the physical person through a medium. Some people call that psychics. That's fine, whatever word you want to put it. Physical mediumship is a completely different animal. It is a seance setting. That means it's in the dark. That means that multiple spirits will come through the physical medium, whoever that physical medium happens to be. There are very few of them. There's only 1 or 2 that travel internationally. And with COVID, as you know, Grant, we got our celebrity seance fun time that we're going to have canceled for this April. And hopefully we will get it back next April. We can bring in some of these physical mediums to sit in seance with us. But you're sitting in the dark. There are voices coming out of all points in space. You're getting touches. You're getting physical feelings from this. You're getting information coming from extraterrestrials. You're getting information coming from a multitude of spirits, including the spirit team of the physical medium. So physical mediumship has the only commonality, as far as I'm concerned, with mental mediumship is the word mediumship. Outside of that, there's not much commonality at all. And it's a completely different environment. And it's so totally esoteric that I don't know how you would go looking for it. It almost has to find you. And as we were discussing before, isn't that so true of a lot of the subjects that are really worth pursuing in ufology, that are really worth pursuing and channeling? Is that you got to dig down, do your homework, and go looking in places that make you uncomfortable, and be willing to trust your own judgment to throw out that which is of no value to you and retain that is. But it takes an effort and it takes work. And in today's time, I'm not certain many people want to do that, Grant. I just don't think We were talking about your Spotify commitment that you made, and this will probably end up on. It's a 45 minute segment. I mean, I think when you go back checking your stats on that, if you can, you'll find that there are going to be a number of people who aren't going to make it through 45 minutes, excuse me, 40 or 45, 45 minutes. And you found this with your stats in YouTube. So we are dealing with such a radically different phenomenon in physical mediumship. And it's also a radically different set of particular audiences and participants. It's a fun stuff. I wish more people could get to do it. That's the whole idea of trying to bring in attention by bringing people in that have some fellowship and have some readership into a celebrity style atmosphere. And I use that term very loosely, and try to get some more attention to this, because if you find that it attracts you, it is absolutely one of the most amazing and fun things to archive and to participate in and to study that I have found.
Yeah, now you mentioned, and I'd like to elaborate on this point, that it's very rare to get a hold of this. So even when I learned that physical mediumship was there, it's not like you can go downtown to your city and observe this. You had set up with Kai Muga, who is the famous one from Germany. We can talk a little bit about him, and David Thompson. And I was going to come down to Florida. So this is the whole deal, was like, you got to go and make an effort to travel, and then they got cut off by COVID. So even though I've been working on this for a couple of years now, I still haven't been in a seance yet. And because I think you can point out that if you look at who is it, Stuart Alexander said they sat for 14 years or whatever it was before you had the first event had take place, every week for 14 years. So these guys are rare. They're not like, trance mediums and stuff like that. These are very rare guys that take a lot of work to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it really does. And that commitment is something that was much easier to make in the 17th century, when all you had was, fire and coffee and some tobacco and, and you could sit around in dark because you're in the dark anyway. And oh my gosh, maybe we'll try to get, contact dead mom or Aunt Harry, or whomever it happens to be. And now that's just antithetical to the way people live. So consequently, it's kind of a funny thing. I've noticed that there's been a great deal of upsurge in physical mediumship, in the interest in it. YouTube videos, that type of thing. You and I had Kai on before. It was well received. There's also seemingly the downside of it is that people are just not particularly interested in things that last any long period of time. And a seance you're going to be in a seance for 2 hours. I've been in them up to 4. And that's a long time to sit in the dark. And whether you're being entertained or whether you are being informed, it doesn't make any difference. And Kai is particularly bad because he always makes us sit on these hard plank chairs that don't move around and whatnot. So you sit for 4 hours in a mediumship seance with that guy, and it's a struggle sometimes to keep up with an interest in something for that long, even though there are dead people coming through all the time talking to you. Churchill, Yellow Feather, Red Indian natives. It's a really tremendously exciting environment, but nonetheless, it runs people over the edge. So I think that, what we're going to start seeing, and I think we're seeing more of now, is, and I'll tell you who's doing a really good job of this, is Warren Kaler. Warren is I haven't sat with Warren in a long time, but he's actually doing seance-like events on Facebook, where you can pay him a few bucks and he'll sit and he'll go into trance, and he may have some type of ectoplasmic face covering that'll change his appearance. He'll speak in different voices. They'll have different subjects that he'll speak about. And in a lot of ways, it has a very nice physical mediumship seance feel to it. This, I think, is kind of where that's going to go. I think more and more we're going to see this online type of stuff for all the reasons that physical mediumship is so solitary to itself. It's only in a few places. There's only a few people that do it. Now we have COVID and they can't travel, on and on and on. And then you have to get past a pretty select group of people who are running the seance to even get invited, because it's an environment where people can absolutely get killed in and have. So you have to be extremely careful from a liability standpoint, from a selection standpoint. The physical medium has to be involved. It's a really long ordeal to get just a seance, much less a weekend of seances done.
So
But
talk
if
about
you
this.
can-
You mentioned this like with David Thompson, whether I was even going to get into the David Thompson thing because of the guy that controls it. So talk a little bit about the controls, because people will say, oh, it's hoaxed or whatever. So go through the kind of stuff that these people like Lee and these guys will do when you hold a seance to make sure that nothing funny is going on.
Well, first of all, the seance room itself, even with David Thompson, he would sit with 30, 35, maybe up to 40 people at a time.
Okay.
But in order to get through the gate, to get an invitation to come, you have to know somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah.
So they all started with small groups, say 5 or 10 or 15 people. And they would all have a brother or a sister, or they would all have somebody that they knew and trusted. And they would go to bat for them and say, bring Grant in, bring Walter in, bring so-and-so in, because they understand this, they've studied, they looked at it, they know what the protocols are, they know what to do, what not to do, what to expect, what not to expect. And the screening process is pretty rigid. So after a while, you end up with running out of seats, because in a Thompson seance, you may sit 35 or 40, but in a Kaimugi seance or a Warren Kaler seance, you're more likely to sit under 20. And that includes the circle master, the medium's wife, if he has one, or best friend or companion, whatever. So the first 4 or 5 seats are gone. And now you only got 10 left. And so you can be very selective as to who gets through that door, so that there aren't any surprises. I was sitting in a physical seance meeting and finished afterward with Warren Sayer, and he went outside and I went outside. I said, Warren, what's the greatest thing that scares you about this? And he says, the fact that I feel out of control because I have to rely on everyone else to vouch for the people coming in. And I thought to myself, boy, that really is something. I've never thought of it like that. I'm putting my life on the line for a bunch of people that I really know only fairly well, if well at all. So consequently, you kind of end up with small groups of people that will get into these things, and everybody knows how to act. Everybody's been instructed. Nobody gets through the door anymore. Oh, this is my first seance. Gosh, this could be fun. What's going to happen? It doesn't work. We even stop doing the pre-seance routines and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do and all this, because everybody's been there and knows it. And if they haven't, they should. And if they don't know it, they won't get in.
Talk about the danger. We talk about this danger. Maybe people really don't realize this thing about the ectoplasm.
Yeah. And I don't want to overplay this, because personally, I've never seen anybody harmed by it.
Yeah.
But I've read the stories, and I know about the Helen Duncans, who had ectoplasmic retraction because the police invaded one of her seances while she was a physical medium. It retracted, pulled all that stuff on the floor and everything back into her gut. 2 weeks later, she was dead. So we have the knowledge that this can happen. But what happens basically is this: ectoplasm is this extrusion that comes out of the physical medium's body. It can come from anywhere. It can come from anywhere there's an opening in the body: ear, eyes, nose, throat, etc. It can come from places that are not open to the body: neck, under the armpits, and between the legs. And it has several qualities that are consistent. And one of those is its photophobia, that is, its ability to be unable to process light. One of the reasons seances are in the dark is because ectoplasm has little to no, depending on the physical medium, little to no ability to do what it wants to do, which is materialize things in physical seance with being under light. So if you happen to be in a dark, or all lights out, and I mean literally all lights out, physical seance, and somebody throws a light on, that ectoplasm is going to return violently back into the physical mediumship, medium's body. And that's the danger that somebody will stick their feet out into the middle of a physical mediumship seance circle when the ectoplasm is extruding and running along the floor, perhaps to go over and tap somebody else or to create a physical a seance animal. Whatever, it's non-touching and it cannot be exposed to light except under special circumstances. This is the danger. And this is why it is absolutely necessary that everybody coming in understands what's going on, understands the dangers, and understands the protocols, and understands how to conduct themselves.
Now, what amazes me by this whole thing is if what's happening is happening, there's something wrong with our idea of the material world. This stuff should not be happening. So can you talk a little bit about the New York Times reporter, Leslie Kane, and what she's done? I think she's really moved this along beyond just sort of stories, where she's basically backing this and has actually done a TV series on this.
Yeah, and you know, we were talking about one way physical mediumship is getting a lift in attention, in other ways, you know, it's having its problems. But Leslie's probably done more for physical mediumship as far as exonerating it as well as publicizing it than anybody. I mean, when you run it in the New York Times, you know you're going to get X millions numbers of readers. She's already got a great reputation, so we couldn't have had a better person to do those kinds of things and be involved in those kinds of things. And by the way, her involvement in physical mediumship is not a one and done. She's been in several seances, and I have her on a very short list I'd like for her to bring down to come into Florida with us when we have our seance together. But she's been with Kai. I believe she's been with Warren Kaler as well. I think she's been with Stuart. I'm almost positive.
Stuart's her main guy, yeah.
Stuart's her main guy, right. Yeah. And there's probably one or two others. So she's been around the block. And she's been there enough to know that if there's any real hanky-panky going on in there, that's what she does for a living. She's an investigative journalist. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is the kind of person you invite, like Kai Mugi. Kai invited her to seance. She took him up on it. Well, you don't invite your investigative journalist from the New York Times to come to your seance if you have any idea that you want to be considered legitimate, unless you're legitimate. And that's what you want. So come see what happens here. Let's discuss this. I think she's done a great job, and I hope there's more of that. I hope we can be participants and bring forward more people to come forward to our celebrity seance when we get around to having it. April of next year, tentative date.
Yeah, talk a little bit about what you're going to do and who you're going to bring in, and maybe we can start getting into who are some of the main characters around the world who are doing physical mediumship, and a little bit about them and who they are.
Well, I want to do it with Kai Mugi as the physical medium. Yeah. And it's not because I dislike any of the other physical mediums. It's just Kai has the most complete package. He's, as you know, he's interesting. He speaks fluent English, even though he's Austrian. He's been around the world. He knows how to travel. He knows how to run a pre-seance as well as a post-seance discussion. His wife is also a very interesting person, Julia. So consequently, we have, you know, a real opportunity, if we can get him over to the States here, to bring him in as, I would say, the most phenomenal of the physical mediums. His phenomena that he produces is the most outstanding of all the physical mediums. And again, cutting no one else short on that, because every physical medium has their own set of things that they bring to the table. So we want to bring Kai in, and we want to bring in people who have both an interest in physical mediumship, but also those that don't. I'd like to bring in people from other parts of the industries, from even the sports industry, from even the skeptics and cynics side of the, bring them all in so that we can have a week of discussions, table tipping with Kai, seances with Kai, and be able to discuss these things to get all the different points of view from them. And again, one of the prerequisites is they bring some viewership, they bring some readership to the table. You've got 30, 40,000 YouTube subscribers, Grant. You know, you put 6 Grant Camerons in there, you all of a sudden you got potentially 120, 150,000 views coming of this. And I think this would be something that would really interest people because it's so esoteric, it's so different. So that's what I'm hoping to do. I'm trying to make contact with people like Peyton Manning, who went to the same school that I did, University of Tennessee. So I'm not saying that everybody that is going to come here has to be, you know, an A1 celebrity with, you know, multiple potentials for viewership. But I'd like to push that envelope a little bit so that physical mediumship as an art form, as an extraterrestrial, and a spirit communication, and as you said, an absolutely glaring example that we haven't got a clue what's going on. We just don't have a clue. And if you go inside of Seance, you come out and go, oh, I got all that figured out. You're either a liar or a fool. And it's one of the two. And let me just say something about that. You mentioned this before, and I was thinking about this. There are things that we know a lot of things about in physical reality. And those things that we know a lot of things about, well, that's good. We don't know everything about those things, but let's call that subject A, because subject A, we all know a lot about. Then there's subject B. We don't have a clue about any of this. It's just like, we're not even on the fringes of understanding this. And as you get through some of the extraterrestrial communication, they're constantly telling you, well, you know, that's a pretty good idea there, but ain't the way it really works. I'll give you a perfect example. We put together physical reality in a concurrent form. That is, my words follow concurrently. You understand what they say. Time clicks off second after second, right? Okay. That's not the way it works for the remainder of the universe. For the remainder of the multiverses, there is no concurrency. They just go from one thing to another. Doesn't make any difference to them. Everything's in the now anyway. So we live in this extremely restricted environment. And it's funny, it's like sitting in a can, looking out the top and going, well, I understand the entire universe because I can see parts of it. It really is. And you're absolutely right. And one of the things physical mediumship will do is it will maybe not necessarily convince you that your grandmother was talking to you in that physical mediumship session. That may not happen. But you will no way and no turn will you walk out of there thinking you know everything anymore. Because there are too many things that are absolutely inexplicable.
Yeah, the one example I brought up before just blows me away. And I did get the chance to interview Leslie Kane, and I said, I want to know about the hand. And she describes this thing where this sort of watery stuff is coming across this table. She's sitting at this table, and this thing turns into a hand, and she said it is as real as any hand you'll ever feel. She could feel the bones, the knuckles, the skin was very soft, like a baby's. It had temperature, and it bangs on the table, and then just sort of goes back into this water and disappears under the table as she's sitting right beside. And that kind of stuff, when you see that, then you realize if we could figure that out, maybe we start to understand what's actually going on instead of making a bunch of assumptions. Because, you know, it does really throw everything. What are some of the things that Kai does that he'll do manifestations? He does something that always interests me is the apportation, the manifestations and the apports and stuff like that. Can you talk about those kind of things?
Yeah, I tell you, matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that. I don't know why. I'll find it here in a second, but I'll show you 3 apports that came out of Kai's eye. If I can find them. There they are. I keep these on my desk here for some reason. I have no idea. Wow. But can you see those? Yeah. Those are 3, and they're hard as rocks. They're crystal-like. They came out of his eye.
Yeah.
It's on. If you look up under Kai Mugi on YouTube, you will find those things dropping out of his eye. And when they drop out of his eyes, they first form as kind of like a liquid capsule. And you can, I mean, you can sit there and he pulls his eye down, you can see the thing forming up and go plunk and drop on the floor. We've had them drop out of the ceilings. I've had them drop and hit me in the head. I've been hit in the head with some pretty large things, which is not a whole lot of fun. But yeah, he does the apportation thing. I think probably better or as well as anybody that I have seen. It's really fun to watch too, but honest to God, when you're watching these rocks start to come, you think this has got to hurt. There's no pain involved either. And so that's kind of one of the other things. How in the world can he go through something like that? His eyes are bloodshot. He's got this rock coming out of the corner of his eye. It's, that by the time it comes out, it's hard. And yet he has no pain from it. It's another one of those improbable probabilities.
Yeah. I mentioned I was talking about the DNA experiment with Leslie, and she just said, well, she really didn't go along with it. And she was asking, like, how would I get Kai's DNA? And it's like, well, all this stuff's coming out of his mouth and his eyes. I mean, it's going to be all covered with DNA. And so this is the thing that people have to realize is that he started just with one or two, but now it's apparently it's like 40 a session or something where these things are coming out of his mouth and his eyes and stuff like that. And when you see that kind of stuff and he does the physical manifestations where he has full body manifestations and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that's true. Warren Kaler, by the way, speaking of apports, he'll sit there and vomit apports into and I say vomit's probably not the right word, expulse apports out of his mouth. And he'll do it into a metal pan. It just sounds like it's raining on a metal roof. There's so many coming out. Kai has really moved his mediumship somewhat away from apportation, although I still think it's one of the most interesting things he's done. And he's finding himself more and more in contact with extraterrestrial, including Ta. Yeah, including Ta, PTAH, which I have a particular affiliation with because I'm originally from Memphis, and Ta is one of the ancient Egyptian Memphian considered mystics of the day, which may have been physical mediumship. I mean, we don't really know where physical mediumship started. It just all of a sudden, there it was with the Fox sisters back in whenever it was, mid 1700s, and they're hearing raps up in New York, and next thing you know, spiritualism, the practice, the religion of spiritualism is born, and physical mediumship is now transported internationally. And it's funny because it's the last place it seems to find its home is here in America, where it originally had its home. But that seems to be the case.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about for the end of this session, and maybe we'll do one more session while we're here. Talk a little bit about some of the ones that bring in the musicians, the famous musicians, and the story with your wife. What was that story? You had one where, was it John Lennon or who was it?
Oh yeah. That's still one of my favorite stories, and my wife loves for me to tell it because then she can always tell me how I told her wrong. So, and she's not in here right now, so I don't think.
Does your wife come to all the seances with you? Does she follow as much as you do? Yeah.
Most of them. She can't do most of it. And then she stopped, and we kind of had a conversation about that. And I'm not going to get too far off from your question. We kind of had a conversation about that. And I think she hit her shock threshold. She hit her, as you call it, she hit her wow threshold. And it was sort of like, I don't need to see that again, and I don't want to see that again, kind of thing. But we were sitting in seance with Warren, I think it was Warren Kaler. And it was not unusual in seance that they'll put a seat up next to the cabinet. The cabinet is where the physical medium sits. It's an enclosed, blacked out area in there where he's tied to his chair so he can't move around and cheat and fraud and all that other stuff. And she gets called to the seance for thing. So you're making your way in the dark, and you're like a mole, and you're trying not to step on everybody, and you finally get there and you sit down. And the circle leader was right next to her, and he reaches over to flip on his CD boombox, because there's always music keeps the vibration up, the energy up, people sing together, have fun. Yeah, it's just a fun environment. And so you're doing that, and you're singing together. Well, he throws his boombox on, and we're going to have another song to sing, and the song is Imagine. And just as soon as the song comes on, you hear this very faint but extremely distinct voice saying the song Imagine, and it's John Lennon's voice. Now, is it John Lennon? Is it a spirit of John Lennon? Somebody's fooling us? I couldn't tell you that. But I tell you what, when he put his hands on her shoulders and started singing the words to Imagine, the pin dropped in the place. And he only went through about, maybe 3 or 4 verses, stanza or so. And then he started to fade out. Typical of a new spirit trying to get his vibrations in line with the seance. And my understanding is that John's doing a better job now, in coming through. It was 30 seconds, but it was absolutely magnificent. 30 seconds. And afterwards, I went to the circle leader and said, did you put that on purpose? The song Imagine. He says, I can't even see my dials, much less what I'm putting on. I just poke the play button and it goes. So somehow Spirit had taken that CD and moved it over 50 songs, different songs, and moved it to the place where as soon as he hit the play button, it started. Otherwise, coincidentally, it's improbable, highly improbable.
Wow. Okay, we're back for session 2. I want to do another session with my friend Walter Rooker, and we're into talking about physical mediumship, which I think is one of the most important things that should be studied. Let me ask you a question about, we were talking as we ended our last session about famous people coming through. Who's the one that brings through Louis Armstrong? And can you tell some of those stories? And does this happen like every time? Do you have something this dramatic happen in every session with these, like the big guys? I mean, say a guy that's just starting would only have a few events happening, but guys like, Kai Muga, is there always like a big sort of wow event? And I guess we should point out for people, one of the things I always point out, the difference between physical mediumship and say trance mediumship is that in physical mediumship, everybody in the room sees what's going on. So it's not like it's evidence just for one person that, yeah, that was my grandfather or whatever. It's something that everybody can see, and you have trumpets flying around. You can maybe talk about some of that.
Yeah. When you say everybody can see, it means that everybody has some opportunity to see that. Now, look, when you're sitting in a circle of 35, 40 people, between the seance cabinet where the physical medium sits and the back of that horseshoe where those 40 people would sit, it could be a distance enough where there may be limited visibility on some things. Some things only happen in front of certain participants in the seance. So you may not be able to see, you'll always be able to hear, but you may not be able to see something that's being shown or whatnot. But the truth is there is an experience there, for everybody to be had. And the majority of the time, everybody does get to see the phenomenon. You talk about trumpets. I was looking at David Thompson physical mediumship session. David likes to bring through several different kinds of individuals. Does he always have a wow event? Does he always have something that is outstanding in there? Well, that depends. If you've been to a lot of his sessions, you'll find that a lot of them are somewhat similar, that he doesn't necessarily always have a super surprise guest, let's say. But he'll bring through William, who is his lead spirit guide, and William kind of is like the MC, and he'll walk around. You can hear William walk. William put his hands on your head. You can feel, just like Leslie King was talking about, you can feel it. You can sense the warmth in it. He did it to me, and he stood on the ends of my toes with his boots to make sure that I knew he was physical from head to foot. And we had a little conversation about that as he was returning to a cabinet. But the the phenomenon issue is really something, because let's take just simple trumpet movement. Now, people will say, well, you're talking about trumpet like, no, we're talking about the old trumpets, like the old cheerleader megaphones. Yeah, exactly. And they're smaller and thinner usually, and often they're made of cardboard. They're not for what they used to be for in the early days of physical mediumship. The trumpet was actually a voice projection unit. The physical medium would put an ectoplasmic voice box inside the trumpet and then speak through that voice box, and the trumpet would actually magnify the sound. Okay. We don't need to do that anymore. They've come up with better ways to get their voices heard. But I was sitting with David Thompson. I was right over next to the table where all the little paraphernalia goes. He has some Tibetan bells and a couple of trumpets and some other items that gets picked up and thrown around the room and moved around and rung and played. And I'm sitting there, and I'm telling you, I'm less than 2 feet away from this trumpet that is sitting there. And before I could bat my eye, that trumpet went from off my shoulder to the ceiling and splat on the ceiling so fast that I promise you, there was no way in the world in light, much less in the dark, you'd have seen it. And then from there, it's liable to do anything. The spirit, usually again through ectoplasmic rods, typically. This is ectoplasm extruded in very, very thin like rods that then grasp things like the trumpet and then fly it around the room. Physically move it around the room, up and down. And these trumpets usually have reflecting tape on them. So even though you're in the dark, you can see the tape reflecting, you know where it is. I've had them come from one corner of the room and stop straight right in front of my nose. And then gone. And then right back again. And do it over and over again, because they're making fun of me, I guess. I don't know what the reason is for that. But the point is that the phenomenon is exceptional, especially in the movie seances. And trumpetism is one of those things that it's really fun to be involved. Now, let me tell you this quick story.
Yeah.
Tibetan bells. If you ever feel ectoplasm, a lot of times the first time you feel it, it will feel as if it is rough textured. It isn't always nice and warm and soft. Sometimes it's rough textured when you get to feel it.
So you have felt it a couple of times?
Yeah, Kai has little animals that will run across you, ectoplasm animals that will run across you early in the seance, and you're allowed to touch and pet those. So I've had ectoplasmic cats running through my legs and dogs jump up on my lap, and you can actually touch those. And he'll tell you that too. So you touch these, but these you can't touch. So you touch them, and they have a different feel to them, And I've felt ectoplasmic hands before, and they have a different, highly textured feel to them. It's kind of difficult to explain.
So you've had this same experience that Leslie had with the hand. Is it just the hand?
Oh yeah.
And that's what people should, I guess, know, is that it's not always the full body. It may be just a head or a hand or a part of a body. It
can be just a hand. It can be a hand that pops up and waves at you. But I've also seen complete full materializations of individuals come out of the ectoplasm, just roll right up out of the floor and roll right back down into it. Tall, and especially in the kind of movie seances, will be a full ectoplasmic being, short the feet maybe, but touchable, seeable, hearable, observable.
So explain for people the concept. So the ectoplasm is produced by the physical medium's body. They extrude it, and then whatever the beings are, the people are coating themselves with that. Am I got that correct? Become in the physical, to enter the physical?
Yeah, the spirit world is a higher vibrational world.
Okay.
And in order for them to appear, many of the spirits, for them to appear physically to us, they have to have some protection between the differences in the energy of our environment and the energy of their environment. Consequently, one of the things that they can use is an ectoplasmic covering which in effect shields them from those vibrational differences. We talked a little bit about this pre-show. Grant, there can be some extremely volatile experiences when you meet beings that are of a higher vibration. And they understand that. And that's their intention is not to freak people out. The intention is to communicate, to open up, spiritual pathways and those types of things. So they're very concerned about being able to do that in a realistic way as possible. And the best way that they can do that is to show themselves as a physical being using some type of thin or even thick extruded ectoplasmic covering. So it acts like a bodysuit, I guess, maybe, like a spaceman, astronaut might go up and they have to put a suit on because of the different physical environment up there. It's something very much like that. And those things typically do not last very long, by the way. We're not talking about a spirit coming in, sitting down for 5 hours and having a conversation with you, ectoplasmic covering. We're talking about in and out 10, 15 minutes at the most in any particular seance situation.
And that's one of the reasons why they don't want sort of newbies in there, because they don't want someone freaking out, because that will destroy the whole seance, right? If somebody suddenly freaks out and heads for the door and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can freak out all you want. You can hit out any doors you want, but they're going to be locked. So, and if you're the circle leader, it really presents a problem, because I've been to one where that has happened. And you don't have really any other choice here, because you've got a medium sitting in a chair. You could have ectoplasm or particles of ectoplasm still in the room. You have a completely blacked out environment and a locked door. And I mean locked, I'm talking about locked on the inside, locked on the outside.
Yeah.
And there's no way you're going to let this person out, because on top of it being locked, it's also totally covered in plastic wrap and whatnot to keep any light from coming in.
Yeah.
So there's just no way you're going to get out. So the only choice you got is just kind of try to talk somebody down a little bit. Say, hey, come on, just settle down a little bit. Everything's will be fine. But the best way is just to eliminate that individual from coming in the beginning. Physical mediumship is not for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's better to scare somebody off or to tell somebody no and have them really greatly disappointed, and that has happened, than it is to bring the wrong person in and endanger everybody in the seance, especially the physical medium itself. I mean, can you imagine this call, 911 call? Really? I mean, hi, I got a problem here in room 8 here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It seems like our physical medium has, retracted all his ectoplasm. I think he might be dead. Now, what kind of response are you going to get to that? You're going to get clunk.
You mentioned,
so, I mean,
you mentioned before that you can sort of tell when a seance is going to go bad, when the vibration is in there. Can you talk about this concept of raising the vibration? And Mission Rama does that. If you're familiar with this Mount Shasta stuff, where they will have events where they're trying to do oming and meditation, and they're trying to raise their vibration, and the beings or the aliens or whatever comes down, and they're trying to lower their vibration, and they sort of open up this sort of a portal Zendra thing in between where they interact. And I understand the same sort of concept is taking place where they're trying to match the vibrations.
Yeah, you got to take me to the Mission Rama stuff, by the way. I think that stuff is fabulous. That stuff is unbelievable. And anybody that hasn't looked at Grant's Mission Rama stuff needs to just, after the interview is over here, needs to run out to YouTube and run to his website or wherever he can find and pick it up. It's just absolutely amazing stuff. And you kind of lost me. Are we talking about portals in particular?
Well, the vibration, the idea of singing, like some people will sing and what you're trying to do is raise the vibration. I remember you telling me that you can tell when you walk into a seance, this is going to go well. The vibration is not right. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, it's a really strange thing. And this isn't a psychic thing with me. I don't believe it is anyway. But again, there's a lot of us that attend seances together that know each other pretty well. There's always a new member or 2 or 3, which is good.
Yeah.
Well screened and the like. But I tell you what, even it's well screened and it's well rehearsed that you have some of these people and let them know what's going on, what's going to happen, whatnot. If they can bring in an extremely cynical attitude and that negative cynicism, and I'm not talking about skepticism now, that's an entirely different thing. Everybody's skeptical. I'm talking about the guys that are going to come in there looking for some way to expose it, looking for some way not to believe it. Their mind's already made up. And when you bring, one of the things that happens pre-seance is that everybody gets together and talks with the medium, and we just, get to know each other and just hang around a little bit, sit in a circle and talk and get everything out of the way. And then the physical medium goes off and comes back and we start the seance. Well, in that period of time, it's just like any social group, though, Grant, people they are who they are. They are their vibration.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out when you've got somebody or some bodies in a group that are pulling backwards on the vibration of the group, because most everybody that is there, if not everybody that is there, is excited to be there. It's not like they're dumb believers. It's just that they're expert witnesses and they are ready to see what the next step is, what the next piece of information could be, what the next experience could be. But if you get one or two in there that are not of that honesty, I think is the best word. I think that's the best word. It just doesn't feel like an honest situation. I could be reading things into it. I haven't been wrong yet. Tomorrow's another day, though. So.
We talked about voices. I remember you sending me a videotape one time, which I thought should be probably set up at all because it was so impressive, where you had it was some sort of technology where they had these things on the wall where you could actually tell where the voice was coming from. And so we're getting into direct voice phenomena here, where on this video, you're listening to the seance taking place and the spirit or whatever is talking. And he says, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. And you can see that in the film, the voice is moving around the room. Because everybody assumes, well, the guy snuck out of the little corner and he's throwing his voice or whatever. But that was so impressive when I saw that. Is that done quite a bit where they're able to do this technology where you can actually track where the voice is actually in the room? Because that was pretty impressive stuff. And then let's get into direct voice phenomena with the great, his name is escaping me, but this idea of direct voice phenomena.
Well, you're talking about Leslie Flint?
Yeah, Leslie Flint. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the Warren Kaler seance where they put up hearing devices around the room to detect where sounds were coming from. Yeah. They not only detected the sound, but they also recorded the sound. Now, the idea behind this is that the cynicist will tell you, well, the guy's just projecting his voice, like you say, or he's coming out of the cabinet. Yeah. Or whatever it is, whatever, the next line of BS is. Yeah. And so Kaler had a scientist, an audio specialist contact him and say, well, one thing we could do is we could set up these devices around the room, the seance room. And then as these voices come out, it will tell us, it will record the voices, but it also tells the location from where that voice came from. People will say, well, what do you mean? Because my voice comes from here, your voice comes from your mouth. But that's not the way it works in physical mediumship. The spirit can project his voice or take his voice or have his voice appear anywhere in the room that he wants. And if that is the case, and you've got a physical medium who's tied to a chair, gagged and bound and yeah. and is completely immobilized, to find that the voices are coming from the top of the ceiling and then bouncing over here, or as they did in that particular thing that I sent to you, it was really kind of funny. He said, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And they jump around the room and say, I'm over here, I'm over here, I'm over here. Leslie Flint and his direct voice phenomenon, he's the greatest physical medium, I think, still to this day. And Leslie had a voice box coming out the side of his mouth, outside his neck here, and he'd speak through that. And he'd have typically 4 or 5 people in a very small room, 5 by 6, 6 by 8. I mean, nobody's going anywhere. Yeah. And his guys would come out and play with him. Some people would come to the door and knock him one in, and his spirit would go to the door and say, we're in session. Go away. Knock back on the door. But it's this idea again that one of the ways that you can show as proof that these guys aren't casting their voice, aren't magicians or alchemists or whatever the heck you want to call them, is this technology which shows where the voices come, who the voices are, the separateness of the voices, the frequency of the voices, like your voice has one, I have one. In places and locales around the room, and you just can't, you can't turn that kind of stuff off and just say, well, gosh, there's just nothing really to that, because there's a whole lot to that. And it's probably still to this day, I think one of my favorite things when people want to talk about physical mediumship and physical mediums being hoaxes and whatnot, I just show them that thing. Matter of fact, that may have been one of the first things that I ever sent to you, because you asked me how I was trying to get in contact with you. I don't remember who it was. We had some friend or somebody that watched your podcast. You mentioned physical mediumship and whatnot. And she wrote to you and said, well, if you want to know about physical mediumship, you need to meet Kevin Lee and Walter Rucker and maybe others. And she copied me on it. And then I noticed you came back on, you were talking about physical mediumship, and I just wrote you a really tacky note. It was really a tacky email.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And it said, look, dude, if you want to talk about physical mediumship, let's get some physical mediums on here. Let's get some people that have been there. Let's get people that sponsor this up. I mean, you're just, talking out your Canadian South down there. And, and it's just, so that's how we got together was, let's put truth to cause here.
Maybe you should send me that just in case I don't have it. Maybe we can attach that little video to to this thing because it's pretty impressive when you see it. I mean, it's like, then you can say, oh, the guy that's filming it is hoaxing it, and the scientist is in on it, but it just gets like crazy stuff. I mean,
it's just, you keep running down what you call the rabbit hole on that, and if you want to just disbelieve it, that's fine.
Yeah,
there's no intent or necessity in you taking in anything that you and I have said today and believing it. It's information. Do with it what you want.
Yeah,
and do with it what you can.
But the people who are doing the seances go through a lot of work. For example, talk about with the gagging in the chair, and then sometimes where the chair ends up outside the circle, or the guy's upside down and stuff like that. Talk about that kind of these precautions that people take. And I know, I think Leslie Kane, I think she brings her own tie straps in and stuff like that, where people go through a lot of work to show that this isn't possible.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I often brought my own physical tie straps.
Yeah.
And changed them for the ones that they were using. Now may have been identical looking.
Yeah.
But just to eliminate that as a possibility, I've never had any physical medium or circle leader ever say, well, I don't want to use yours. They're the same thing.
Yeah. But
they came from me and I can vouch for them. I think the thing that needs to be understood is that the physical medium isn't just some guy sitting there with a microphone in his hand, announcing and seancing what's going on. He is sitting in a cabinet. He is in the chair, strapped in by zip ties, by leather straps. He may or may not have a gag in his mouth. Many of the physical mediums, Leslie Flint being one, would often put liquid in their mouth. So to say, okay, if it's me talking, explain to me how I'm doing this with a mouthful of liquid. And at the end of the thing, Leslie would spit the red fluid out in his mouth, same as he took it in, and just sort of look around and say, okay, what's the next objection? It's almost like going on, okay, what's your next objection? Well, at some point, it's just like, okay, screw it. That's enough objections. It just has run its course now. I cannot think of the gentleman. I'm trying to think of his name. He's a friend of mine too, and I should, who did the Warren Caleb. Scientist from high school lab down at St. Monica High. This guy has been doing all types of acoustic work and light work and studying physical mediumship, as you and I have done, for quite some time. But I will send that to you again. It is such a great piece.
Yeah, it's very sort of convincing. Although, as you said, it's not going to convince everybody. To talk about the Leslie Flint, because that is pretty impressive stuff, and you have a collection of this stuff that. I guess we don't have to get into the University of Manitoba, but there's some collections of this stuff. He's online, and talk about some of the people that would come through him And you can sit there and listen to that stuff for days. I mean, he just got all these things and did it over how many years? 20
Oh,
years?
at least, gosh, yeah, it was at least 20 years. Leslie passed early 1990s, if I remember correctly, 91, 92 or so. And he was holding these seances in his house, a couple different places in England, daily. I mean, sometimes twice a day. So there were hundreds and hundreds of these things. And there was one pair of couples that sat in a lot of seances. I'm talking about hundreds of seances with them and recorded everything and then transcribed everything. And the Leslie Flint Foundation, that's LESLIE has dozens, probably more than that. I haven't been there in a while, of these things online, including the transcripts. So you can actually sit there and listen to Charles Lindbergh or somebody you may never have known, some common Joe off the street that got killed when a truck ran him over. And you can read the transcripts, which helps a little bit because these are British folk and they don't speak good American. And so you can listen to the transcripts and pretty much come away with a really great session of what's being said and the information that's being passed and the validity of the information as they talk about their lives to their loved ones, to their wives that they passed on from, to their brothers and sisters and daughters and sons, as well as to people that sit in seance and know some of these people who come through many times in Leslie's seances. It's really, really the most incredible things. And the sadness of it is it's not happening now. That it happened in a time where a lot of this was buried. But let me tell you, historically, again, if you go digging, you'll find this information. It won't take you long. Pick any Leslie Flint seance you want, whether it be a celebrity or whether it be just a local Joe. Sit and spend 30 minutes, listen to it, read the transcript. If you don't come away with impressed about the afterlife and the value of spirit communication, there's not much else is going to do it for you.
Do the spirit people have to learn how to do this? Sometimes you hear that they're working on experiments and they're trying to, or they talk about the thing where you can barely hear the spirit. It's their first time and they don't know how to do it on the other side either. They're trying to communicate, but they don't know exactly how to do it. Whereas the same as you said, like with John Lennon, you sort of get it down and you start to get better as you come into different seances.
Yeah, one of the things that was explained, I think it was in a Flint seance. Matter of fact, it was that on their side, on the spirit side, in order to communicate through the medium and through his ectoplasmic voice box, they actually have to put their being into a somewhat similar apparatus. I'm sure it's not exactly an apparatus. And when they try to explain this, it's very difficult because they have difficulty in giving us terms that we understand. But the best way I can explain it, as it was explained to me, is that it's like putting yourself into a mask, that covers you all up. And then you speak through that mask, and that mask somehow delivers that message back through the medium and out through the ectoplasmic voice box so it can be heard. So they are sitting on their side was almost what you might call equipment, machinery, something that they have to learn to do. And you can tell. I've watched Winston Churchill go from being, you could understand him, but he was never on for more than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
To saying, Winston, it's time to go now. It's been 5 minutes. We need to get on. Did I tell you about my Winston Churchill book story?
No.
Oh, so I go to the seance and Churchill comes through and he comes over to me and he says, I want you and the circle leader and another guy who happened to be a Spanish, Mexican speaking, a Spanish guy. He says, I want to dictate my book to you. And I said, well, okay. And he says, it's going to be called something like the Prime Minister's Guide to the Afterlife, or whatever it is. So cool, fine. And so I go away and I come back to the next seance. I go buy my $150 recorder.
Yeah.
I go to the seance. I'm going to sit there and record him giving his book. Warren Kaler's going to bring Winston through. And so I get back to the seance, and I'm sitting there thinking right before the seance, and I'm waiting for Churchill to come through, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, maybe I need to ask him how long this is going to be, how long a book. And he says, so he comes in the seance, and he says, are there any questions for me? And I said, Winston, I have a question. He comes over. When I say he comes over, his voice comes from one end of the seance room over to directly in front of me.
Okay.
And I said, okay. I said, Winston, you want to do a book? Good. Yeah, right. Yeah, I do. I really want to do it. And he said, I'm bugging Warren, the physical medium, about this all the time. He says, I want to get this book. I said, good. I got the thing, got the recorder, got the time. Okay. How long is this book going to be? He says, 671 pages. And I said, okay. And then I'm doing this in my head, this calculation in my head, 671 pages, so many words per page. That's 50 hours of 50 hours of. I said, listen, we can't do 50 hours of this. And it dawned on me. He had no concept of time.
Wow. Yeah.
What's 50 hours of him? It's nothing. And he couldn't understand what the problem was. So I met the physical medium outside, Warren, later after the seance. I said, this isn't going to work unless you're willing to sit for 25 2-hour sessions for free, because I'm not paying you. And he says, he's been bugging me to death. He is on me night and day about this. He says, just forget him. I said, okay.
What did you tell Winston when he was at that point? Did you tell him we can't do it now, or what did you say to him?
No, in the following seance, the next day or whenever the next one was, I was sitting out in my car. I went back out to my car because it was cold. It was like 75 degrees. And it was, well, the seance rooms are typically cold because they kick the air conditioning up to make sure everybody stays cool. Yeah. And so, so I go out to get some long pants, whatever, and I sit down in the car, and Churchill comes through my car. I'm going, oh, Lord. And so anyway, he comes in, are we going to do this or not? Basically, and I said, no, we're not doing this. Winston,
wow.
I said, look, I said, if you will, how about just do me one favor? I said, now, if you want to talk about extraterrestrials and you want to do like a short book or whatnot, let me know about that. He said, okay. So I didn't hear anything. I get out of the car, going back to the seance room. I said, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom because you're going to be in there for an hour, 2 hours, get your business done. So I'm going back to the seance room, and here comes Warren Kaler, the physical medium. It's just, coincidence, right? Yeah. And so we're going to the same bathroom, a little stinky old bathroom, the toilets, and we're in there. And I said, hey, Warren, I said, I just talked to Churchill. I said, I want him to do something on extraterrestrials. And we started laughing because he knows Churchill's bugging him and bugging me. And so I'm trying to unhook him and whatnot from this thing. And he says, okay. So we laugh about it. We go back up, we get into the seance. Okay. So we're in the seance. And here comes Churchill. He comes over to me with Walter. I heard what you and and Warren Kaler, the medium, were talking about in this bathroom, which is like 50 yards away from the seance room. And of course, I don't care what, it still amazes you. And you go, oh, did you? And he goes, I'd love to talk to you about extraterrestrials sometime, and we'll have a really long conversation about that. Wow. And what he was saying was, okay, book's dead. Let's move on to another subject. Wow. Never did have that conversation with it yet, but I'm still looking forward to it.
Now, one of the things that's been discussed with Annie, if you know the story behind communion, where they get the 170 or 200,000 letters or whatever, and Annie is reading all these letters at a great rate or whatever. She comes out and says to Whitley, she said, Whitley, whatever this UFO thing is, it has something to do with death. And you'll see this thing where beings will have the aliens or whoever they are we'll have dead people in the ship. They've got this contact. So this is just speculation. Have you thought about this idea? What are we talking about? Are we talking about at a higher vibration? Are all these beings in the same sort of etheric world, or how do you relate all this? Because you mentioned that Kaimuga has got the aliens coming in, and I think we can get, the next time we do a session, we can bring in the skull, and they had the blue being come in when they went to Spain. So you start getting this crossover between the aliens and the dead people.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are two things going on, Grant. You remember before I said, sometimes we understand the universe like we're at the bottom of a tomato can soup.
Yeah.
We think we see a lot, we don't see much at all. I think there are a couple of things going on here, but I don't really quite understand the distinct relationship between the various ethereal beings. That is, I have a tendency to believe that they don't belong in layers, like a cake.
Okay, yeah.
Here's vibration level 1, vibration.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think that's right. I think that many of them, especially the most evolved and non-material physical beings, non-material beings, I think that many of them just float wherever they want to float to. They are whatever vibration they want to be. I think Bashari is saying that. You can be whatever vibration you want to be, go wherever you want to go. We have a real difficulty understanding that because we're locked into a very, very thin level of frequency. But I think a lot of them have the ability to either consciously or unconsciously move between those vibrational fields at their will. Now, does that mean that somebody that's just passed over, using a linear sense, somebody who's just passed over is all of a sudden going to be able to sing with the angels, and the archangels, that were considered to be the highest vibrational beings that we know of? No, but he may very well have the ability to appear here in the physical reality. He may very well have the ability to move up the vibration level from where he's at. So they have some type of ability to modulate their frequency within some levels to be able to create some movement between realms. So I don't see it as that. I see it as a soup of things, with some people having the ability to move through that soup more easily and more quickly. Now, that is what I think is what we get the extraterrestrial situation from. It becomes so very important because these beings obviously can move in between any frequency they want, many of them anyway, in any way they want. And they're holding the keys to the universe, literally the keys to the universe. Now, the question is, how much more do they understand than we do? Well, I guess we're going to find out. Open contact's coming, Grant. It's not that far away.
Yeah, that's the one thing that comes to my mind, is that sometimes you get whether it's through some of the people, physical media, maybe it's Leslie Flint people, is this idea that you live with your family and the kids that die, they grow up in the spirit world. And it's almost like it's just an extension of our world. And you wonder, are they creating that world? When you go into the other world, are you creating whatever world you believe in? Or are you thrown in? And the other thing maybe I throw into this mix is the idea that 40% of all people who have had an abduction experience, or whatever you want to call it, a big experience, will say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Which I said is another thing we should probably check out. I mean, if someone says, which would indicate that whoever put them in that state, whether they're extraterrestrials or whoever they are, would have access to that realm. This idea where all the information is out there. So that always puzzled me, this idea where or a lot of, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people who spiritualists don't really believe in reincarnation, where they feel like there's just another level. So are we creating our reality when we get over there? Is that how you understand this? Because that always threw me off when I heard people saying, that we grow up with our children. Well, then what happens to the father and mother, well, then they got to grow up with their family, and then they got to grow up with their family, and everybody's a kid in somebody else's family. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it doesn't. And so, yes, we are. And as we create our physical reality here, we're doing the same thing in the more ethereal, non-physical worlds. Our reality is nothing more than a reflection of what we believe in and what we want to do. It's nothing more than a reflection of intention and actions. And nothing changes as you go along. You get better at it. You maybe get access to higher vibrational realms. Maybe you certainly do get all new experiences that you can add to your collection of expertise and add to your collection of knowledge. But it's still always the same thing over and over again. We're changing constantly. We're never the same person, millisecond to millisecond. And I mean that in a very literal sense. I don't mean that in a sense that, well, I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit different. No, you're completely, totally new, a billion times a second. And that doesn't change. That change, I think, is constant. And if there's anything that doesn't change in the universe, and I'm convinced of this, change doesn't change. Meaning that it's constantly an evolving process. Now, a lot of people look at that and go, gosh, that's kind of scary. I want to be able to get my hands on something. I want to be able to ground into something. I want to be able to understand something. Well, you're going to be grounded. You're going to understand. You're going to make the changes, and you're going to see that the difference here is that that's the way it is. Change is the constant. And once you find yourself back out of spirit, or as I like to say, returning to spirit, I don't think we ever left. I think we just came down here, took on these physical wrappings, and to get the experiences that we're having, just like the one we're having today. It was just a wonderful thing, by the way. But I don't see that ever changing. And why should it? The universe, the multiverse, whatever you want to call it, we're just a perfect reflection of it, but we're also just a shard of it. And I don't think I want to go to a place where I die and I wake up and I have all the answers and I have all the same people, no offense.
Yeah.
All the same people around me that are around me now.
Yeah.
I want them to have new experiences. I want me to have new experiences. I want you to have new experiences. I want this audience to have new experiences. That doesn't mean you love them any less. It doesn't mean you're trying to forget them. But then again, it's just one very, very small portion of an eternal life. And you have to say eternal with a big E.
Yeah. Interesting, because I have an interview, you may know, I have an interview with the beings. I have these beings from England that have contact with these two women who want to talk to me tomorrow, not tomorrow, Tuesday. So Tuesday at 7 o'clock London time. So if you got any questions you want to give me, because that's what they basically said. And when I heard their stuff, I heard some of their philosophy, like the oneness philosophy, like everything they said went, yeah, whatever they're in contact with is making some sense. And they had made that point. They said, look, they asked, like, where are you from? Look, we're from here. You guys are the visitors. You come in, you're only here for a couple of years, and then you depart. We've been here all the time. And it's this concept of almost like stories where we make the mistake that we, as I always point out, you suddenly assume that you are the actor on the stage. You are not the actor on the stage. You are playing an actor on a stage, and you're going to leave and go play an act someplace else. You're only here for 70 years, and you make the mistake that this is the way it is. This is where I am. And the old idea that because you played King Henry VIII in high school doesn't mean you're King Henry VIII. You just played King Henry VIII, and we're playing these roles of one after another, almost like you're creating stories for the one. We're the ones that creating. I don't know if you saw the podcast I did where I basically got an intuitive insight, and then I contacted this Mark Sims guy who got from this being that he's with for 14 days, told the same thing, was that God doesn't create anything. God is the one. All he does is create the sparks of the divine, and the sparks of the divine are the ones that are creating the universe. So it's the duality, and they're creating planets and stories and stuff. And the one is just the observer watching all this kind of stuff. And so the beings sort of got into that as well. So if you got any questions for the beings, pass them on and I'll ask them, because they actually claim that they already know the questions I'm going to ask. And I'm thinking, when the other girl told me that, I said, well, that's pretty weird because I don't even know the questions yet. But this is going to take place. It's like a trance channeling thing where the woman's going to zone out. She's going to disappear. And these beings sent me a message. And they said I would get it. I'm the only one that they want to talk to. I would get what they're going to talk about. So we have our chance sort of to tap into, maybe figure out what that's about.
Well, Grant, if they don't know what you're going to say, then I suggest to you that they may not be very powerful beings.
No, they said they know. They said
that's what I said.
They know all the questions.
and if they said, well, we have no idea what he's going to say, my answer was, wait a minute, can't you move up and down a timeline?
Yeah,
I mean, Willa Hilla Chrising does all the time. She's Bashar's 700 years in advance being. So, no, you would expect them to do that. Yeah. Now, is that surprising to hear? Of course, it's surprising to hear.
It's kind of weird that I hadn't even thought of the questions myself. And but they're pretty, not arrogant, but they're pretty assured of themselves that this is all going to happen. So that's what I find. And maybe you can talk to me as we close down here, this idea that the life that you and I live, I always talk about the fact that most people in life live lives of quiet desperation. They have no clue what's going on. They're just making a living. They're just going through, and somebody says, you got 6 months to live. And then they're scrambling, trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do now? Where am I going or whatever? And you and I get to play this unbelievable game. And I think you play the same thing as me. I was always a collector as a kid. I used to collect matchbook covers. I even got this collection of 17,000 matchbook covers from, it's 100 years old. And I was just good at collecting things. And I was just interested in the next thing and the next thing. And you've done the same thing. You've got these huge collections of stories and stuff like that. Do you feel like me that this is, you couldn't have lived a better life? I mean, it's like, get ready for the next life. You're going to be, some, poor guy in Africa because we used up all our good life. I mean, we just you couldn't ask for a better life for what I've had in terms of the things I've experienced, the people I've met, just incredible. Same
here. There's no doubt about that. And we don't say that in an elitist way. I sure hope nobody in your audience takes that as being that we're special, that look, we all create a plan for our lives. This was my plan. This was your plan. It was our plan to get together on things like this, share information, to take these different journeys. Your journey is as completely different as my journey is, even though they seem to be on parallel paths. But they're totally different roads that we're taking, even though we can see each other and whatnot. You remember the thing about the train splitting and whatnot? This is what I'm looking for right now. If you ask me, what am I trying to pay attention to? What I am seeing happening more and more is that we're diverging into different sets of beliefs. We're diverging into really totally two different types of peoples that don't get the clue, don't have any interest, they're not here for that. They're here for other reasons. And people like ourselves that, feel like we have a clue and want to research it and whatnot. And at some point, we're told that the vibrational difference between those folks and us, and again, this is not the elitist folks and the non-elite. Just two different paths. Somebody's taking I-95, somebody's taking I-40. Okay? Just two different paths. That's going to go away. And one day, I'm not sure I'll make it there. There's a good chance I will, because I believe open contact's going to happen here in the next 5 to 7 years. And I mean, real open, publicly known contact. And it's going to change everything, literally. But I see that splitting between people's ideas. And I'll tell you who absolutely catalyzed that for me. It was Donald Trump. I cannot tell you how many. I am apolitical. I don't take political stances. It's impossible not to take some type of opinion about Donald Trump. And whether your opinion is this or your opinion is that, it is bifurcating. It is isolating. It is very difficult to keep friendships alive and partnerships alive, not with my wife, because she hates Trump. But anyway, to keep those things alive when you have this huge separation of what is right and wrong, what's real and unreal. And I saw that as going, holy cow, this is really starting. We're getting this split.
Yeah.
And it's not just a political split, it's a metaphysical split. It is a mental, emotional split. People will start to fall on one side or the other, Grant.
Yeah.
And as this goes along, there may be a day when you and I are having a conversation and we're looking back at this tape and we're going, what are we talking about? Where do those people go? Who are those people?
Yeah.
Because I think that at some point it's going to be untenable for those that have a particular level of interest and vibration and knowledge, and those that do not, to be able to cohabit the same physical planet. I seriously mean that. And I think we will find ourselves on another Earth, and they will find themselves on the Earth they want to be on, which is perfect for their journey.
Yep.
And those twains will stop meeting. And I think that's happening very rapidly.
Yeah.
And when open contact comes, it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that in next session, because we're going to do Bashar in next session. And Bashar is big on that concept. Well, last question for this session. And I want to do another physical mediumship thing. We can sort of go over some of the stuff later with questions as to what we didn't discuss. I want to talk about Kevin Lee. I want to talk about this. If you can get into a little bit with what's it called? The mediumship. Participatory mediumship, where you make things. When I saw that, I mean, that was like, holy cow, if I could see that, it was just like, wow. I mean, so just explain what that is.
Well, we were talking about two different things there. What Kevin Lee does is called, now you got me doing it. It's not participation. I'll think of it here in a second.
Precipitation.
Precipitation.
Precipitation mediumship, yeah.
Yeah, what it is precipitation mediumship, which basically is, to make it very simple, is he will take a stack of blank cards,
yeah,
put them in a box, ask a question, open the box up, and the answers will be written on.
Yeah, and with the colored crayons.
With the colored crayons, and the signatures of the author of that, so that you can match the signatures up, and the handwriting sometimes is a perfect match and the like. And it's just one of those things. It's sort of like, it feels almost like magic. The guy says, look in the box, there's nothing in there. Close the box, look in the box, there's something in there. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be making fun of Kevin, because his precipitation medium, he's probably the most active, if not the best precipitation medium that I've ever seen, and maybe the only active one in the United States today. It's an old art that goes back to slate writing.
Yeah.
Back in the days when they didn't have ballpoint pens and the like, and they wrote on slates, and they put these empty slates in there in these boxes, and then open the boxes up after they said, Spirit, tell me this. And they'd open the boxes up, and there would be the answer on the slate, and there'd be no chalk in the box.
Yeah.
So the Spirit not only had to write it, but he had to supply his own chalk. Yeah. And that type of mediumship is really unusual, but it's highly evidential too. And I've sat in Kevin's house and watched him do stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, it just
maybe if I come down there, you can get him to do that.
Oh, sure.
I would love to see that. That's just, and this will be my last question. This is this idea of, I call the theory of wow. Do you think that the spirits, this is part of what it's about? They want to impress, they want to amaze. They're trying to get across the message that there is a life after death, that we are here. And the only way you can really convince people is by really weird stuff. Because if they just come to the message and say, okay, there's life after death, everybody goes, get out of here. But when they give you these weird things that you cannot explain, they're sort of producing this evidence, and they're working on the other side. They're trying to figure out what, like, even if we get in, like next time we can maybe get into the skull experiment, some of the really weird stuff, the people on the other side, and they said they had a team of 500 people on the other side working on this stuff, and they're thinking up new things to do. Is that what it's about? Or even if we go back to Bob Bigelow, and they asked him about Skinwalker Ranch, all that weird stuff that happened at Skinwalker Ranch over all those years, what do you think was going on? He said, oh, it's all messaging.
Absolutely.
It's all messaging.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're just grabbing you by the nose and smacking you around a little bit, trying to get your attention. And they know the best way to do that is to show you something that you don't think you believe could ever happen.
Yeah.
and that way it'll damn well stick with you. And so I thought, oh, absolutely. It's your wow theory of UFOs, why they have lights, it's physical mediumship, why do that? I mean, you just go on and on and on, and they're just, it's almost like they're making fun of us.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, really it is. I mean, they're saying, hey, idiots, watch this. You know, figure that one out. And the answer is there's no figuring it out. And one of the things I like very much about our conversation, Grant, is that we know daggone well we haven't got it figured out. We're not even close.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of it. That's the fun in moving down that path and getting a little bit here and a little bit there. And every time you pick up a little bit of knowledge and you look up the path, there's some more and there's more and more. You just keep picking and picking and picking up pebbles of knowledge until you get to a point where you have some understanding of something that at least you can deal with, something that you can make sense of in physical reality. Once we get out of here, it all makes sense. But for right now, yeah, it's really a fun situation, a very fun ride. And we are, again, I'm not being elitist, we are just extremely fortunate to have picked, at least in this incarnation, which, by the way, we got a million other incarnations going on at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is the one we just happen to be focusing on between you and me right now.
Yeah.
But all those things happening, it's just, I mean, you know, Grant, we're stuck in this container of physical reality. And I'm looking forward to getting back to the point. This is what I think I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get back to the point where this is no longer amazing to me, that it's no longer anything more than just another day at the office. You know, you understand what I'm saying there? It's a fight to get out of my own way. That's exactly what it is. I'm fighting to get out of my own way. And as woke as I'd like to think I am, I still feel like I'm just smothered in blankets of doubt and uncertainty and things that I want to investigate and don't know why. And but then again, that's where the fun is too, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I've noticed, and you could probably back me up on this, is that when you look back where you started, before I do it, because I have no interest in UFOs, and where I am now, that's why I say, I may not know what's going on, but I can tell you it's 1,000 times more complex than what you think it is. Because the more you look at it, the more you realize, like, wow. And when I go back, that's why I say where I feel lucky. Because when I go back, I was one of those people in 1974 going to university. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with this university stuff. Had no idea about anything and didn't believe there was any miracles. You know, they maybe happened in the Bible, but there's nothing happening here. And then suddenly this thing is right in your face and you go like, what is going on here? And the amount that I've changed since 1974 is like unbelievable. It's not two different people.
I'll give you just a real quick story. And it's one that I'm ever grateful for because it started, I believe this is really where this whole idea of what the hell is going on happened for me. I was in 1960, I was 8 years of age and my father took me to a baseball game, a professional game in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's a big deal. Memphis, little cow town, professional baseball's coming there. Watch the game. I know who hit, I know everything about it. I remember it like it was yesterday. And halfway through the game, I had to go to the bathroom. And this was at Rustwood Park, which was one of these old parks basically made out of wood. And so I go into the bathroom and again, the bathroom, and I no sooner closes the door than it becomes unbelievably hot. I mean, so hot that I could hardly touch the door. So I pried the door open, ran out there, you know, didn't ever go to the bathroom, told my father about it at some point. And I said, this place is going to burn down. And, you know, my dad, nice dad, he goes, yeah, the strange one has come forward again. And so we go off and we stop on our way home to have a drink. My father wanted to have a drink with one of his friends and friends of ours. And we turn the TV on, boom, there it is. Park's burning down.
Wow.
My father turns around and looks at me like, what in the hell is going on? And I just turned and said, told you. Well, that's when it changed for me. Because from that on, I had multiple experiences, including a C5 encounter and the like. But that at 8 years of age, that absolutely rocked my world because I knew it absolutely right then. I didn't have a clue what was going on. And I had no idea what that was about, but it was something, and it was important.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where we all come from. It's something, and it's important.
Yeah.
Now our job is to figure out what that something is, and what's important about it, and hopefully we get better at that as we go along. But if not, it's a great journey. It's a great ride. Grant, thanks so much.
Yeah,
Again.
thank you so much. I mean, it's like sitting there watching the Super Bowl, and to be joining up with you who have so much material and so much knowledge. I appreciate what you've done for the physical mediumship, and I still haven't been at one of these sessions. So for me, it'll still be a real wow effect because you can hear it. It's the same thing when people hear your UFO stories or stuff, but it's a different thing when it's right in front of you, and it's like, it's different than people can't understand. I remember they were asking me the question about information, and you probably had this experience as well. In the Denver group, I was asked a question like, so how do you know when you get sort of like, you think one of these download things, when you how do you know that's just not you? And I say, because when it happens to you, I say, look up noetic. It's like God is talking to you. I know this is for real. Don't tell me. And there's something different. But unless you have that experience where you get that certainty of this information and whatever, you can talk to people till they're blue in the face, and you are not going to. You're never going to explain it. You have to experience it.
You have to experience it. You can't explain it except in just factual terms. This happened, that happened, these events and whatnot. But you know what? It's all you talking to you. It's not really some spirit or some alien, or it's your higher mind that's talking to you. It's telling you what to go look over here. This is exciting. You're talking to yourself, and because everything folds in, nothing folds out. Who was it that said there's nothing out there?
Yeah, John Wheeler. There is no out there.
Yeah, and there is nothing out there. It's all inside, and I understand that's hard for people. Some people wrap their minds around, but if you'll start there and think of things as happening from you instead of to you, because of you instead of because of who you are, because of what you can do, but we're very, very powerful beings. And one day we'll all have this, we'll be sitting up wherever we are, in whatever realm we are, and joking around and talking about what a bunch of fools we were down here.
And hopefully we can move.
At least we had fun doing it, though.
Yeah, hopefully we can move it a little bit, because I have empathy for the people who don't understand. Because I mean, if it weren't for the experiences, we'd probably be the same situation. It
Absolutely.
You have to have empathy for people who have not had the experiences that we've had, and realize it could be us, or in our next lifetime it may be us, or whatever. So we value, and that's where it always sort of drives me, is because I was raised very religious, and the Bible says too much is given, much is expected. And Edgar Casey said, knowledge not used is sin. So if you get the information, you can't go there after you die and then say, well, I would have done something. I would have stopped watching baseball. But the onus is on you to use what you've got. Too much is given, much is expected. So I always try to keep that in the back of my mind and do what I can. But I agree with you. I mean, it's like being at the Super Bowl every day, watching and you feel honored that you got to play the right game. So, and thank you for what you've done. And let's keep going. And what do you intend to do with your stuff when you're gone? Have you got a large collection like I? Have you got plans for? Good.
Yeah, I have taken 2 or 3 hard drives, multiple terabyte hard drives, and loaded them with everything that I would like to archive.
Wow. And
then I have 2 copies of each hard drive. So I have 3 plus the originals on my computer, plus the originals that I upload to my uCloud account.
Yeah.
I'm hoping between the 5 sources, I'll be able to figure out how to archive some of it, archive all of it actually. But it has nothing to do really about me. It's about the information.
Yeah.
And I just want the information available. And somebody trips along one day and finds this. My kids know about it. My wife knows about it. People that I'm close to now, like you, know about it.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to put a copy with the University of Manitoba, if that's anywhere, just to have the copies out there. And I've got one of these hard drives sets of hard drives put away where I won't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that it's information that's so unbelievable or astonishing, but it's this. We keep forgetting from where we came from.
Yeah.
We keep forgetting our Egyptian information, our Grecian information,
Yeah.
our Roman information, our
Yeah.
Sumerian information, and all our Anunnaki information. We can't even remember 15 minutes ago what we ate. So I mean, it's just a matter of not about me. It's just like, here's the information. Information will find its own home. I've just got to make sure it's available. It's the best I can do my part.
Good. Yeah, I agree. It's I always refer to it, it's like living at the time of the signing of the Constitution or the birth of Jesus or whatever, that you lived at that time. You got to be there and you record it for history, because it will fade away unless you record it. That we're honored to be in this place and to put it out. So I always tell experiencers, like, have you written this down? Even just for your kid, write it down so your kid knows what happened, in case, in case there's a disclosure and openness, and then it's like, oh my, everybody's scrambling to find out what was going on. That we have this material, and it just sort of always scares me that you could die tomorrow and my kid has no interest in it at all, and it would all be sort of gone. And
yeah, I understand that, and I've left in my very, very brief will a copy of each of those to my kids. I have two adult sons, one to my wife. And for that matter, anybody that wants, I'll be happy to give access and copies to, because it's a matter of throwing it around enough different places that it hopefully cannot just get eradicated by the silly little interim attention spans that we have here.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
No.
Next time we'll talk about Bashar and a little bit more about physical mediumship again. I really enjoyed it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I just appreciate having met you and what you've done.
Oh man, thanks a lot. Look, this has been a lot of fun, and if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't be doing it, would we?
Exactly. That's the thing. That's why I sort of feel, honored that I get to play this. It's like every day. It's like just like being in a candy store all the time. It's just unreal.
Well, enjoy it. You do a great job. I'm one of millions of people out there that love you and adore you. Well, maybe not millions.
We haven't done enough work to get there. Okay.
I haven't done enough work today. Thanks again. Tell Sinead I said hello.
Yeah.
If when you run across her, and like I said, I kind of keep up with Desta a little bit and whatnot. So all of my Grant Cameron friends out there, I want to say hello to, and to those two. And again, thanks very much. Let's do it again soon.
Okay, and I have been given an offer to interview anybody I want from Contact the Desert. I picked 12 people. So, and if Sinead or Desta doesn't want, if you look at the Contact the Desert list and you see anybody you want, they're setting up the interviews for me, and it's to promote their conference. So it gives an opening, and I always appreciate when you come on to help interview, because it's not my favorite. I feel better when there's somebody else with me asking questions. So if you see anybody you want to interview there, be involved, I'll bring you in on the interviews.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure that there will. I made a CITD a few years back. I was kind of thinking about making one this year, or Laughlin or something, but
see, they're doing it online, but they want the promo stuff. So I'm doing a lot of their promo stuff for them.
Well, and that's great. Sure. I'll take a look at it. I'll be back to you.
Okay, and send me that little clip of the voices moving around the room.
Got it.
Good. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Grant. Good to see you, and thank everybody.
Namaste.